The Western world is not just declining, it's crumbling. And to be more precise, it's collapsing, and if you pay close attention, you'll see the cracks everywhere. For centuries, Europe and America sat on top of the global pyramid. They dictated the rules, controlled resources, and shaped narratives. But today, the empire is stumbling and will fall soon. The financial system is shaky, military dominance has been exposed as fragile, and the very nations they exploited for centuries are rising up and saying, enough is enough. This isn't some random accident. No. What we're watching is the end of an era. The Western order was built on extraction, exploitation, and control. And when those pillars collapse, the entire system shakes. Had they built their economy on their own solid foundations instead of leaning on outsiders, they wouldn't be drowning in this disaster now. So let's break it down piece by piece. Why is the Western world crumbling now, right before our eyes? Let's start with resources. For 500 years, Western wealth was built on plunder. Africa's gold, diamonds, uranium, and oil. Latin America's silver, copper, and sugar. Asia's labor, silk, and spices. Colonialism wasn't just about flags and maps. It was about feeding Europe and America with free or cheap resources at the expense of hungry Africans. Even after formal colonialism ended, neo-colonial systems kept the money flowing. Western corporations controlled African mines, Western banks dictated African debts, and Western governments set the prices. France, for example, kept a colonial currency system, the CFA franc, that literally forced African countries to deposit their wealth in Paris. But here's the twist. That control is slipping. Leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta in Mali, and Duma Boko in Botswana are flipping the script. They're kicking out Western corporations, demanding local processing of minerals, and forming alliances that keep wealth at home. And let's not forget uranium. France powers 70% of its electricity with nuclear energy. But much of that uranium comes from Africa, especially Niger, and this is why there are so much insurgents. Now that Niger is pushing sovereignty, France's lights could literally start dimming. Without Africa's cobalt, Europe's electric vehicle dreams stall. Without Congo's minerals, Western tech giants choke. The era of endless free supply is ending, and the West is panicking. Let's talk money. The United States, the so-called world's richest country, is drowning in debt. Over $34 trillion and climbing. Europe is not far behind. Economic stagnation, unemployment, and soaring inflation are hitting hard. The middle class in the West, once its pride and strength, is collapsing. Housing is unaffordable. Healthcare is a disaster. Education costs are crushing families. Meanwhile, countries they once called developing are building at lightning speed, namely the Sahel region. China has become the factory of the world. India is a tech superpower. Brazil dominates agriculture. Russia controls vast energy supplies. And Africa? Africa holds the minerals of the future: cobalt, lithium, gold, and oil. The West's secret weapon was always the dollar. But today, even that is under threat. Nations are trading in local currencies. BRICS is expanding, building financial systems that bypass Washington. When the dollar loses its grip, America's empire loses its fuel. Here's another crack. Sanctions used to terrify countries. Step out of line, and Washington or Brussels would crush you economically. But not anymore. Look at Russia. Despite massive sanctions, its economy has adapted, and its trade with Asia and Africa is booming. Iran, long targeted, is still standing strong. African nations are openly defying Western pressure. The dollar's weaponization has backfired. Instead of making nations obey, it has forced them to build alternatives. That's why more countries are turning to the Chinese yuan or exploring BRICS currency systems. Even Western soft power, Hollywood, universities, NGOs, has lost its shine. People are tired of Western propaganda. Countries are telling their own stories. And once the illusion fades, the empire looks ordinary. But let's not only look abroad. Inside the West, things are falling apart too. America is deeply divided. Race tensions, political polarization, and gun violence have created a nation at war with itself. Trust in government is at an all-time low. Europe faces its own crises, cultural clashes over migration, rising far-right movements, and fractured unity in the EU. Even infrastructure tells the story. America, the land of highways and skyscrapers, now has collapsing bridges and water systems poisoned with lead. Compare that to China's bullet trains, Africa's new infrastructure projects with partners like Turkey and China, and India's booming digital revolution. The truth? The West is fighting itself from the inside, while the rest of the world keeps moving forward. For decades, Western military power was seen as unstoppable, but Iraq and Afghanistan proved otherwise. Trillions wasted, thousands of lives lost, and nothing achieved. The so-called war on terror exposed the limits of Western might. In Libya, NATO destroyed a nation but unleashed chaos across the Sahel. Instead of stability, they created endless wars. And now, even smaller African states openly reject Western military bases. The myth of Western invincibility is dead. Here's the most important part: the rise of the global South. Africa supplies the minerals of the future. Latin America feeds the world with soy, beef, and lithium. Asia manufactures everything from smartphones to solar panels. The very foundation of the global economy now rests outside the West. And the global South is no longer begging. They are demanding respect. Pan-Africanism is growing stronger. Latin America is asserting sovereignty. Asia is pushing its tech and financial independence. The expansion of BRICS is the biggest sign. With Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE joining, the West is losing control of trade, energy, and shipping routes. The future is multipolar. The days of one empire ruling all are over. So, why is the Western world crumbling now? Because the system it built no longer works. It thrived on exploitation, but nations are reclaiming sovereignty. It relied on financial dominance, but the dollar's grip is weakening. It boasted military might, but its wars ended in failure. It projected unity, but its societies are divided. The truth is simple. The West is crumbling because the future no longer belongs to a single empire. It belongs to the many. And for the first time in 500 years, Africa and the global South are not spectators. They are center stage. The world is changing, and the empire knows it. The only question is this: will the West adapt and share power, or will it collapse under the weight of its own arrogance? What do you think? Is this the end of Western dominance, or can they reinvent themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want raw, unfiltered truth about history, politics, and global power, subscribe right now, because here we don't sugarcoat reality.